Welcome to episode 9 of Opolis Public Radio. I'm John Paller, your host and founder and steward of Opolis. Today I'm joined by Russell Castagnaro of the Governor's Office of Information Technology. Hey, Russell. Good to see you, man.
You too.
So his mission is champion solutions, processes, and technologies that make government services more accessible, usable, and responsive to public needs. He's got a lot of different hats that he wears over there. So one of them is myColorado, which is a digital identity play that's been sponsored by the state and had the blessing of the governor. And previous to that, he was the CEO of Wampei, a company dedicated to bringing peer-to-peer payments to any business, regardless of credit, race, religion, origin, whatever, with or without a bank or a third party. So, Russell, it's fabulous to have you. We're thrilled that you're part of the innovation space in Colorado. And tell us a little bit about how you got here and your background and, your role specifically at the state.
Sure. How I got to the state or how I got to Colorado?
Yeah. Tell us about the Hawaii thing and how you got here and why Colorado and the whole thing. 'Cause it's actually quite an interesting sort of path. You probably couldn't predict it.
Yeah, no, it was definitely circuitous, I guess. So I moved to Hawaii in 1997 after I was around that time in the IT world. You had this sort of weird consulting model where you did big bid projects and implemented about 80% of them and started moving your staff off to some other one. So it made for lots of really unhappy clients, and I hated working in that environment. So I found a company in Colorado and in Hawaii that wanted to let me start a practice for them. So my wife at the time and I moved down there. I worked there for a couple of years doing EIS and that kind of a practice. Loved it. We were going to stay there for 2 years. Ended up staying there for almost 20 years, raising my kids there, the whole thing. And for 13 of those years, I ran the self-funded government portal called Hawaii Information Consortium. So we did all the e-government stuff in the state. So file your taxes, start a business, get your birth certificate, order Obama's birth certificate, surprisingly, do weddings, all these kinds of crazy things. And I loved it. It was great. But it kind of peaked out. And so one of the things that was really crazy was we were the first state to legalize marijuana. Talk about circuitous, right? To legalize marijuana through legislation. So we had in Hawaii at the time, we had
not referendum.
Right. So it was legislation. The first state to do it through a legislative means, not through a referendum.
Right.
And which was a big deal. And so I was actually brought in to talk to the Senate or to a committee from the Senate to how should we regulate them? How should we pay? And in the legislation, they're like, oh, well, we have to get a cashier's check because we don't know if their bank account's going to be getting. And I was like, no, you can't ask for a cashier's. You can't ask for a check. They're not going to have bank accounts, And so when that happened, I started looking into alternative ways to be able to receive payments. And then I read about this thing called Bitcoin, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I saw a bunch of things that were happening at South by Southwest that year with Bitcoin. So I went there and went to all the South by Southwest Bitcoin sessions at the year. And I was like, okay, this is what's going to solve the problem for us. So after that, I was pushing to try and get Bitcoin accepted as a payment method for all these cannabis companies coming on, and also for other taxes and stuff like that. Well, that led me down the sort of rabbit hole of crypto and blockchain. And so by the time 2016 came around, I realized that I probably peaked with HIC, couldn't really do that much more. And so I wanted to start Wampum is what it was back then, but then Wampei as we changed the name to. And loved it. It was great. It was a good model and everything. It was the perfect product, except we didn't have that many customers. But that's a famous startup thing, right? But it was really great being in the technology, helping companies figure out what, we helped a lot of companies that ended up failing. A lot of the initial cannabis companies didn't really hold up. A lot of the like others, there's lots more than just cannabis companies that can't take payments. So it was doing a lot of work there, and then realized that I couldn't do this and live in Hawaii. Hawaii is, I think, at the time, it was the second most restrictive as far as blockchain and cryptocurrency states go. I think now it's the most restrictive state, since BitLicense has come a little ways since back then. So my ex and I wanted to find a place that was good to raise our kids and everything separately but together. And we looked around, and I was like, well, Colorado was in this crazy place. It's not dominated by one party. It's pretty purple. The population really needs to work together. It's relatively young. It's not, not a super old or super young population. Lots of diversity. Lots of people come there. They don't have like a major center, a finance center, or like the East Coast or West Coast, which with all the startups and everything, it's sort of in between everything. And from my standpoint, I always wanted to get back into government. And it's not that we don't have a budget here that you have to put everything together with duct tape. But at the same time, you can't just say, oh, we need to solve that problem. Let's just throw $100 million to a big consulting company and let them do it. You have to actually use some ingenuity and come up with the right sized sort of solution. And so that was like, oh, this is going to be a great place to move to. And so I was going to be half-time in Hawaii and half-time here, perfect life. And I got off the plane in September, and I was working at a co-working place. I had an office, and they said, oh, are you going to Denver Startup Week? I was like, what's Denver Startup Week? So I ended up going, and I saw state and city government all really, really supportive. I saw the amazing stuff that we got out of the startup community, the support from all over. This was like the biggest, I guess, startup event I had ever been to.
It's one of the biggest in the country. I mean, of any size of city.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And then to see that even the companies that were here, and that was really the kicker, not only government, because government always wants to help, do startups make it happen. But the companies themselves were giving their space for their office space to do these events that were going on throughout the week. It was just like, oh my gosh, how can I have a startup anywhere else, right? So I decided I was going to sell my house and move full-time to Colorado as a result of Denver Startup Week. And so then moved the company here 100%, and really got to talk to loads of people. I mean, the crypto community here, the blockchain community here, even though it was growing, was crazy. That was the first year ETHDenver happened. And so, I remember walking in and seeing this poster up like, ETHDenver, what's that? And showing up and like, oh, wow, this is kind of crazy that there's all these people. I only could go for like a couple hours, but I was really bummed out that I was only there for
this. Is the 2018 installment, the first year? Oh, wow.
Yeah, the first year.
I didn't realize you came to the first one.
Yeah, it was like super quick. Because I had my kids, and I was had somebody else watching my kids for me for 2 hours. And so I was like, okay. And so that was crazy.
What are these buffacorns? What is that?
I had no idea. I was like, okay, and I didn't really get the whole buffalo thing yet either. So I was like, what's happening here? And luckily, when you come from Hawaii, there's all this crazy Japanese stuff. So you get used to little trinkets and stuff. So
yeah,
I was familiar with like crazy cuteness, but I wasn't familiar with the rough cuteness of the buffacorn.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was nobody really was back in 2018. Right. Everybody's like, "What is that? That's weird." And now it's like, "Oh, it's collaborative and magical." Like, I get it. It's kind of fun, but
yeah,
whatever. But anyway, it's like total nerdery, but like we like it. It's a good meme.
What's the field varmint? Is that the
spork marmot?
Spork varmint.
The spork marmot. 2021 is the year of the spork marmot.
I'm ready for some varmint.
That's hilarious. So how did you land at the governor at OIT? So for everybody that doesn't know, it's the Governor's Office of Information Technology. Explain what you guys do. You guys support all the state agencies except the Secretary of State.
So there are certain parts of government that are executive agencies, right? And so that's the big ones that have executive directors that are appointed by the governor. And so those are the normal ones: DOLA, DORA, revenue,
right.
Higher ed, public safety. So we support like actually all of them, but in our charter, we are made to absolutely support agencies, right? The agencies are the executive agencies. And then there's other parts, and Secretary of State is its own, the Secretary of State's elected separately. So they're separate, but we work with the Secretary of State on certain things. It just depends, but it's not, they don't have to go through us for things or anything like that.
And just to give everybody a sense of like the type of orgs that you're talking about here, the size of OIT is how many?
About 1,000 people.
1,000 people. So you have 1,000-person internal org, and then the total head count of the state agencies that you support?
I think it's around 30,000. That's in like with direct support, with some direct services. We may do we do a lot with the counties and everything in more of a consultative way, especially in the time of COVID or any sort of crisis. So it's even more than that, really, the community of individuals that we actually serve.
And then your role is really heading up digital transformation, right? So it's emerging tech, overseeing innovation, modernizing public, as I always like to say, modernizing public good infrastructure with technology, right? Really looking for optimizations and working with all the different agencies to actually implement that.
Yeah, and I think I think that's an interesting part of my job in that. If you have 12 consultants in the room, you'll have 14 different definitions of digital transformation. That's just the way it goes. Why
don't you tell us what your version is then?
Right. So I believe that digital transformation is leveraging, and I think you already said it in my introduction, right? People, processes, and technology to help solve problems with our customers, for their customers, and ourselves, right? And so,
and your customer being the state agencies.
So our customers would typically be a state agency, or in the case of myColorado, actual individuals.
Yeah, actual
citizens. And then their customers would be their constituents, whoever they serve, whether it's the public or it depends. But that is what I'm really not interested in is what we used to call automation projects or modernization projects, because automation is exactly what it sounds like. It's saying all we care about is making the back end work better. So
it's sort of the point solutions and automating certain maybe manual processes, but it's not really changing the face of much of the dynamics, right?
Right. And modernization can be sort of the same thing, but I've seen modernization projects where they just upgraded the technology and decided to move that green screen from a terminal emulator to a 4GL generated green screen app.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you talk about modernizing, right? I mean, if you're talking about just like incremental improvement or step changing, it's not that exciting. But if you're talking about moving from a Web 2 world to a Web 3 world as a modernizing plan, right? Like that's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think I don't have the luxury of being able to push Web 3 very much.
We'll talk about the GameJam in a minute, but they don't understand what that is. But
what they do understand is that things work better.
Right.
And so the way I look at it is, and one of the reasons why I like working in state government so much is because there's really no other place you can work that positively affects more people when you come to it with the belief that you want to do good. Like you can change more people's lives in state government because you can get into state government and do work and come up with solutions and solve problems. You could do it with more people, but it's much harder to get in federal government, right? But in state government, you really can make a huge difference with solutions. And when you do that, if you go when people go to the typical DMV, not the Colorado DMV, because actually it's pretty good, but the typical DMV, the one I compared to other states, compared to other states.
Depends who you ask, but anyway.
Right, but if you go to what was the movie with Speedy?
Zootopia?
Yeah, about? Zootopia. The world of Zootopia. You get out of that and you feel defeated. You feel like nobody really cared about you. No, the government didn't care. You were just doing what you had to do to get through this excruciating process. And when you can deploy government, what's that?
It's painful.
It is. But if you can go through an experience, if you can experience something where you're surprised, you're delighted because it went so well. Like, wait, I'm done? Like, this is all I have to do? Well, I don't, that's when it gets, that's the good stuff. That's when you leave as a customer of the government service. You say, oh, wow, maybe they know what they're doing. And I feel taken care of and I feel better about my government, and it's, that sets the stage for like remaking the whole relationship that someone has with their state government, and that they're thinking, oh, the government is actually trying to help and get me back to doing what I'm supposed to be doing, whether that's working or enjoying my time with my family or going off and hiking in the mountains or whatever it is. And that's what I think digital transformation has to do. It has to let, whether you're a state employee that don't have to go through a tedious process to do something, or you're someone who's using government services and you don't have to go outside of your normal routine to get something done.
Yeah, well, I mean, what it sounds like you're talking about is like, so if you rewind the clock to state governments and what they were designed to do and how we got here, state governments have always been designed to look out for their constituencies, right? Like it's designed to look out for the citizenry of that particular geography. And as a citizen of that particular state, you're given certain rights and services in exchange for paying taxes, right? And what seems like has happened is like the best interests of the government over time has evolved to almost just be the best interests of the government, right? So like the government, like because of, re-elections and incentives around, getting elected and all of that, like, I think there's a large group of people that feel like the government just isn't working for them anymore. And then these bureaucracies are just gobbling up state resources to just exist. And there really isn't a motivation or incentive to actually get any better. In fact, shoot, if we were to cut out 80% of our costs because we really implemented some digital transformation that was just amazing, well, we wouldn't get that budget next year. So why would we do that, right? Like, so it seems like you have a pretty interesting sort of seat, because you probably feel that sort of like the old school and the new school kind of like tension, right? So tell us about that. Like, how is it, what's it like sitting in the middle of 40-something thousand, 30,000 plus 1,000 people and you really leading this effort of digital transformation? Tell us about how that is, and how's that going? Like what are the challenges and positives, and what are the movements?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to go on that. It's such a great and interesting question, and probably one of the coolest challenges of my job, or a number of the coolest challenges of my job. Colorado has a smaller budget than, if you compare it to other states, than other states would have for the population that the government serves.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. So TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, keeps the budget really, really small compared to what what a 4.5 or 6 million person population state would normally have. Our budget, and the amount that we spend on like IT specifically is, I think the last I saw was about half of what the average state would spend as far as a percentage of our revenue. So we keep things pretty light. And what that means is most of the time agencies are under the gun and underinformed about the kind of solutions that are out there, and either they're overly dependent on vendors, or they're just trying to fly by the seat of their pants a lot of times. And there are some that are very well funded, but most of them want to do the right thing. They're trying to do the right thing, but this is hard work. And, one of the cool things that the Opolis administration did when they came in was they said, let's go agile. And in agile, one of the things that one of the tenets of that is to fail fast, right? You want to put up ideas and have them fail when you've only spent $10,000 on it instead of failing after you've spent $1 million on it, right? And that's not to say that we're encouraging failure, but we'd rather something fail earlier than later.
Sure.
So really bringing that forward, and I'm not the only one who's trying to do this in the state. There's lots, and CDOT is one of the ones that's really interesting in how they approach agile approaches and innovation, and how they incentivize different groups. They're very interesting. But one of the things that we did just last year was introduce a new method of procurement, which was an intent to negotiate. Right, and that's so you could support an agile procurement for services that basically involve deliverables along the way. That at any point you could say, okay, well, we're going to cut it loose now, right? So that you could, for the first time, have one of these agile projects, these big projects that come out. If anybody that's listening to this probably has some tech chops, they know that 75% of waterfall projects fail, and they may fail because they delivered exactly what they're supposed to do. Not that happens a lot, but even if they deliver exactly what they were intended to deliver, it turned out the business rules for the organization changed in the period of time.
Or just the overall requirements ended up being antiquated or whatever.
Right,
like
exactly.
Some
of these big projects take years and years to deploy.
Yeah, and by the time you get it done, it's like the whole industry of whatever you're in is advanced beyond what you were trying to build to begin with.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so that's why, some of the things that we've been doing, like luckily with the legislation that came out, was it 2 or 3 years ago, around blockchain, where we funded these blockchain use cases. And that was what was some of the driving stuff behind ETHDenver last year with the Colorado Forward Track.
That was still this year, man. Can you believe that? That was
this year?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's like 6 months ago. 7 months ago? Oh my God.
But it was pre-COVID era.
Yeah, it was PC pre-COVID.
Yeah, but it seems like forever ago, But actually approaching it and saying, look, let's see if we have another way to solve some problems by throwing these problems out there and saying, hey, we're looking for solutions. That was crazy. That a method of one of the things I was trying to do was to get remote work through. That was my area, trying to make sure that we could support remote work and even go as high as 30%, 40% of our workers being remote. And I was pushing for this. And I was like, oh yeah, well, let's take it easy. Let's slow that down a little bit. And then COVID happened, and within a month, the state was 100% remote.
That's insane. So you were getting all the pushback just trying to get remote to 30%. And then COVID pushed it to 100% in a month?
Yeah. And
that is
goes
unbelievable.
Back to people having other things that are on their plate that they...
No, I know, but it highlights the bureaucracy, though, because when push comes to shove and you got to do it, man, you can do a lot of things in a very collapsed amount of time if you have to.
Well, in a lot of ways, the COVID crisis has enabled us to move forward in leaps and bounds. One of the
trimming process, like a pruning.
Yeah, one of the things that the Department of Revenue was able to do because of timing of their leases, when COVID happened, they dropped a lease for one of their buildings. Yeah, because everybody was going to be remote, and then we scrambled to get them migrated, and we worked with our existing vendors to try and come up with solutions that didn't require a desk phone. Back then, I remember that we had a bunch of IVR systems, interactive voice response. So it's when you call in, that can only be reprogrammed from someone's desk phone. Those kinds of things are out the window, right? Right. Once
done.
No one's coming into the office. We were talking about how, that's a real hassle because on days when there's a big snowstorm, you can't come in to change it the same. But when you have a big pandemic, it turns out it's even worse, right? So So those kinds of things have been amazing. And, the digital ID is one that's really close to my heart. One of the reasons that this job appealed to me was also that digital identity is one of the big blockers for blockchain, unfortunately, right? One of the things that's really inhibiting its adoption. And with digital ID, Colorado is one of only 2 states to offer a digital driver's license that you can use in any real way. And the things that we're doing in the future we're going to do for digital ID go even further. So I think, that's another one of those that COVID sort of pushed that to the fore even more as well.
We should tell our listenership that you've got some information coming out about that. We can't talk about it yet.
Right. We've got a lot. So we're going to be coming out with a whole vision for what we think digital identity can do for Colorado and where we should end up with it. Right now, if you talk about where we are as far as digital identity and digital ID, the myColorado app is available on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, and you can download it on your phone. And if you have a state ID, Colorado State ID, or Colorado driver's license, you can actually on-ramp and get an electronic version of your license that you can use, and you can scan that. You can scan it with a QR code or with the 2D barcode that's in the back. You can also, one of the things we're trying to do is to socialize this this idea that your data is yours. Right?
Weird.
I know it's crazy. It's not quite sovereign identity, but if you go to a bar and you don't want that bartender or that bouncer to know what your address is, you can hide it, right? You can just show them, oh yeah, I'm over 21. There you go. They only have to see your.
They just need to know that you're over 21. That's
exactly. They don't have to know your birth date either. And so that's really, really a cool factor that people start realizing, oh, this is something I can do, because it's going to normalize what really the next phase is, which is selectively sharing your information and only sharing what you must share.
Or what you choose to share, right? I mean, it's really about choice in the end. I mean, I remember I was on a panel last year, and this was a state of, I think it was the Department of Education thing. No, it was a C-Lab thing. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. And, some really, really intelligent people on this panel, but, they were really talking about data from a perspective of like federating data, right? Like federated data sharing. And like, I was sort of the boohoo guy on the panel, because I'm just like, look, I think you guys are talking about like things that are already out of date. Like, the next iteration of this is actually handing the user their own data and allowing them to share it with whomever they want in a validated, attested to kind of way. I mean, you're talking about things that just aren't going to happen anymore. And they're like, I don't think they'd actually really considered that. So the fact that you guys are doing this at the state level, and this is, being championed by, the state, and saying like, look, people need to own their data and privacy is actually being considered. This is really big news. I mean, this is not like small stuff, because I mean, in a lot of settings, this is like pushing string up a hill. Like, if you were to go walk into the state of California and talk, even though they're super innovative and progressive and all this concept would be like booed out of the parking lot. Like, I don't think that they're ready for it. Colorado's like a unique place to do that. It seems like, at least from my take.
Absolutely. We have a couple of questions that popped up. Should we answer those too?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like, what do we got here?
So okay. I saw GT said, you mentioned socializing the idea that my data is mine. Can you hide your weight? I love that question. I always like to hide. Yes, you can hide your weight. So you don't have to display your weight on there. So boom.
Done. Adopt it right now. So.
Yeah. And the other is what can people do to help you with user adoption? I have a background in anthropology and would like to help with user experience stuff. Oh, well, I'm Russell.Castagnaro at state.co.us. We'll probably post, I guess we can post that in some notes or something.
Here, you can type the answer right here. Russell.
Oh, there we go. Look at you.
Castagnaro at All right, so cool. Anyway, yeah, and we're gonna have some more, a little bit more time at the end of this, Russell, for Q&A.
Oh, okay.
So we'll let them kind of funnel in here. Yeah,
Sure.
we'll let the next ones. Yeah, thanks, Yev. Good to see you, hear from you.
Yeah. But you know what I think is really what's really gonna, you know, going back to what you said, it's like that joke about, you ever hear the joke about the brother and the chicken and the eggs? No, so this guy goes to the doctor, goes to the psychologist and says, "Doc, I got to tell you, I got a problem with my brother." And the doctor's like, "Okay, what's the problem?" It's like, "Well, he thinks he's a chicken." And it's like, "Okay, it sounds like I should be talking to your brother, not to you." And then he says, "Well, here's the thing, I need the eggs." Right? So he doesn't, well, you know, he knows it's crazy, but he needs the eggs. The same thing with people's data, right? We have this federated model where where organizations are sharing and owning our data, right? Our individual data, and nobody really has a framework or a business model that works in any other way, because nobody can really conceive of it. Right?
And data is dollars, so data is the economics. So what you're really talking about is actually reallocating the data back to the source of it, and at the same time reallocating economics, right? So that's the resistance. That's the sticking point, right? So we are really talking about a reorganization of economic design. I mean, it's really talking about a new game to help manage people's personal lives as it relates to their citizenry in Colorado, as an example, right? Like, their data is their privacy. It's their stuff. It shouldn't be shared with just everybody, every state agency that wants access to it. Like, no, I mean, that's...
Well, and the thing is that up until recently, we didn't even have a chance of managing that like ourselves, right? We needed these third parties to do this because it was the only way to make it happen. The only way that we could make it so you could get an insurance quote when you needed one.
Absolutely. Intermediaries were the innovation of its time, right? So creating intermediaries to automate or you know, simplify or create new services is sort of the way that we used to do things. But now it's really moving away from that through tech.
And likely they'll still be, I mean, they won't go away, right? But we'll have a whole bunch of new services. You know, it's just like, you know, horses didn't go away when the automobile came out. They just had a different use most of the time, right? And the same thing with this is that this will give a safe space for the next dozen, 50, 100 companies in this space to let businesses get the information that they need and only the information that they need. And by the way, also mitigate risk. So what we can do now is give attestations as opposed to the actual information. So do you need to, you know, when you go to a liquor store and you buy alcohol, they're required to check your ID, right? And so they can do that. When you have liquor delivered to your house, they have to be able to prove that they checked your ID. And what that means is that they probably take a picture of your driver's license on their phone and upload it to the server somewhere, right? What we can also do with this kind of technology that we're working on is make it so that they no longer have to manage the risk of that PII, that personal identifiable information, right? They can get an attestation, and we can even write on the blockchain, hey, they checked their ID and they were over 21, done. And so now, boom, that's how they can do it.
That's awesome. So myColoradoTM is out, so people can go do that. So we talked about like working with the state agencies, coming up with use cases, rapid iteration, pilot programs. Like what else are you excited about? I mean, there might be this sort of employment play that I've heard about. This,
yeah, I
what's
wish
it called? Opolis.
It's the Irish version of our government. No, it's Opolis. Yeah, no, I think that what Opolis is doing with the Commons is really amazing, and the number of different applications, even outside of where we think about, you know, gig economy, high tech, or those kind of things. But people that don't have another way to have an organization that's looking out for them and need to get some sort of benefits and are really on their own otherwise, can really take advantage of what you're doing with Opolis. And unfortunately, it's too early to talk about it, but there are a lot of people talking about it. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think Opolis is you know, I think it's really interesting to kind of see how the convergence of, you know, private for-profit sort of like efforts, like collaboratives, like cooperatives, right? Like can actually begin to provide public utility-esque type services that aren't necessarily government owned, right? But they could be government supported, right? So it really could become by the people for the people.
That's right.
In a much more pure sense, because it's like real time economics too. It's not, well, we got to wait 8 years for for an exit, and we got to do all this, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're really doing it in real time. And you know, creating fluidity of work and creating just opportunities for individuals, and really creating the next generation ecosystem for these kinds of interactions is really what we're talking about here. And I mean, I'm thrilled to, I mean, I wish we could talk more about specifics because, you know, we got to get a little bit further down the road. But are there any other pilots that you're excited about maybe looking at implementing aside from one for Opolis and obviously the Colorado ID, but we've talked about the DMV, we've talked about, I mean, I've heard stuff about birth certificates. I've heard stuff about like all sorts of different things. So anything else that stands out to you?
So we have a lot more potential use cases that are coming out for the government. And now they're not just talking about use cases with blockchain, but they're talking about, you know, simple things like your fishing license electronically in your wallet, right? Credentials, like getting, you know, when you look at what like learning economy and what higher ed is doing, being able to have your credentials that you get from your higher education, from, you know, a university or community college in Colorado, being able to put all those on there. Just imagine, you know, it's kind of a horrible experience for a lot of schools when you want to get access to your transcript. Simplifying that, you know, would make thousands of people all over, you know, breathe a sigh of relief when they have to figure out how to do that. You've got and you know, I'm really excited to grow on what we've already done with the Colorado Forward or Forward Colorado through ETHDenver this year, and then through the GameJam, which this is GameJam shirt, right? Which was
I was going to say that's a pretty sick shirt, man. That's awesome.
And it's super comfortable as well. But really excited to see what we can come up in the next iteration of like a sort of innovation festival, right? That we can bring even more great minds to the frontier of GovTech, right, which is Colorado. And I think that it will be, you know, whatever we come up with is going to be at least 10 times as awesome as GameJam was, which was 10 times as awesome as what we did for ETHDenver. So, and I'm really excited about what the next phase, that the details of which aren't 100% clear, but I can tell you right now that that it will be exciting.
Yeah, well, I'm highly aware of how exciting it's going to be. So, like for our listenership, we're going to just tease a little bit here. There's going to be some pretty significant announcements here coming up in the next couple of weeks, likely about what the plans are for ETHDenver 2021 as it relates to the state and what that's going to look like for everybody. But just plan on you might want to get some support for your jaw, because it might actually fall to the ground and get, you know, skinned up a little bit. In all seriousness, though, like it's really awesome to have the support of just an innovative governmental structure, right? Like something, an organization and a set of people that's actually willing to lay it out there and make these take these risks and make these changes on behalf of its citizenship, right? Or citizenry.
Yeah.
Like it's really pretty, quite frankly, it's rare. And it feels like, you know, I was talking with our CTO the other day, and we were talking about innovation. And, you know, when you talk about the tug of war, right, you've got the old and the new, and you get the tug of war. Well, it's often the best pull in the tug of war of things. Pull the rope from the center. Create a new dimension. Don't get into the binary fight, but like let's actually create something new. So in the vein of that, 2021, I think coming out of the backside of COVID, hopefully, is going to be a pretty big effort. I think on behalf of.
That's a horrible image, the backside of COVID. But
whatever. But the tail end of it, right? Like we just,
right.
I think coming out and looking to opportunities and what's sort of been created in the sort of middle of 2020 with all of this is going to be, I think, a big opportunity for the state and for individuals to get involved. So I think it's going to be really cool. So for those that don't know, do you want to give us the high level on what the GameJam was about? Because of course I was involved in it, but you
could do a better job of that. It's too bad we don't have Lou here. So I should mention that, I'm the director of digital transformation, and I work more on a micro scale with every agency and everything. And then you've got Lou Cordova, who is working in the governor's office on digital transformation at a higher level to digitally transform, to give higher level support to decision makers so that they can have a brave space to innovate to their heart's content to solve problems.
Well, what I think is cool about it is it's not happening from inside of like she left the Department of Revenue as the ED, right? To now take on this special advisory role to the governor about digital transformation. So it's not actually a part of any one agency. So she has a lot more. It seems like she has a lot more sort of direct access and latitude to kind of really make things happen. So that's shout out to Lou, by the way. She and the entire crew at the Colorado Lottery did a fabulous job at working with us.
Cool
on
event.
It was really cool. So for those
I popped in on some over the weekend, I would pop in on a random group that was just chatting about their solution and stuff. It was really fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. So for those that don't know, ETHDenver and Opolis being, really involved in that whole effort, of course, we were approached by the Colorado Lottery wanting to build a hackathon, essentially to design a new game for the Colorado Lottery. So there's a lot of factors that went into kind of initiating that. But in the end, we had 30 project submissions from 200 participants, 209, I think. I'm just flying off the seat of my pants here, but it was like 21 states and 20 countries or something. It was like, wow. I mean, and all of this came together like really wonderfully, and just the collaborative nature of it and the quality of the submissions was really cool. The verifiable, randomness that was proven by using the Chainlink technology. I mean, it was really
a great hook. Bringing Chainlink in for that. Was it an Oracle that they provided random numbers? Is that?
But yeah, I mean, it's basically what verifiable randomness using blockchain tech is like this new thing, right? So it's basically gives provable fairness, right? So it's like, well, look, if you have a blackjack app or something like that, or anything that requires, like even these games of chance, right? Like where you're playing a monitor game and you're picking numbers and whatever. It's like, well, the last thing you want to know is that somebody could game that. Like, but in today's iteration of gambling, like it is gameable. I mean, because somebody owns the code, right? So in the world of blockchain tech and what Chainlink was able to demonstrate and what a lot of the participants actually built into their games was verifiable randomness, right? So like provable fairness of the game, which was really a really cool sort of foreshadowing, I think, of what could come. Mm-hmm. And, the lottery was thrilled and the participants were great. We mailed out swag packages to everybody that participated and gave an address. So like everybody got one of those t-shirts that you're talking about. So that was really cool, really fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, so more to come, Etherspace on that.
Hey, can I mention a couple of things about myColorado too?
Please. Yeah, it's your floor.
Yeah. So what's really cool in myColorado, back when we released it in October of last year, Governor Opolis came out with an executive order that basically said, hey, this is a real ID. And one of the things we did was exempted out the police because we wanted to make sure we worked on their safety. So, one of the most dangerous things a policeman does is they get on the side of the road, and a lot of them get hit by cars. And so minimizing the amount of potential for harm to come to them in just doing their standard job. And we are actually in the pilot phase. And I have to give I think she is moving on in a couple of days, but Dr. Teresa Sizarek, our CIO, gave us plenty of safe space and cover for the team to develop this solution that we're actually in live field testing with public safety to allow you to use your digital ID if you got pulled over. Not so good, but if you get pulled over, you forgot your ID. Oh no, I've got it right here. You can do it, and you
awesome.
You don't give your phone to them or anything. You just send your phone your information electronically. It includes your registration and your insurance if you've loaded it on your phone too. So that's pretty cool, and that's coming out. And we're also piloting with a few other healthcare organizations to allow you to use it like for enrollment. Into their system. And of course you get to choose what fields they actually can access to do that when you're
right. That sounds like a really interesting integration for Opolis.
I think we should.
Maybe we should.
Let's do it.
More to come.
Yes. It's the immediate sign up. Scan here and immediately
and it basically cuts out, half of your onboarding. Yeah.
All right. So we're doing that with the My Colorado journey, I think, as well. We're working on a super easy, that's a lot more younger folks are doing their My Colorado journey, which traces their kind of their whole career path through their education process into their jobs and new jobs and all sorts of cool things like that.
That's awesome.
And also, I just want to, in case they're listening, we have a great team at OIT who we're operating in a very different way.
Shout outs.
So we've got a great team of developers and testers, and all these, developers and testers are now the same thing because we're all agile. But we used to have a great team that is highly motivated, and we're getting this out in a way that kind of blows everybody that sees what's happening away, including ourselves sometimes. So it's really cool. And if anybody is interested in downloading the app or learning more, it's mycolorado.state.co.us is the website. So.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, we got one final question here, and then we're gonna go ahead and call it a day, man. So we got Taylor, my man. What's up, man? From Learning Economy. What's the major hurdle to achieving a true Web3 state infrastructure, and what's the one thing that Jane or Joe Schmo can do to help?
So that's a great question, and I think that the first thing to do is to ask yourself, when has it ever been a good strategy to talk about a specific technology when you're trying to get something adopted? Like, just like saying, oh yeah, everybody should be using crypto. Well, no, we have to have problems that are solved by Web3 technologies. So what we should do is be open and actively using more Web3 tools so that we can normalize those. Right. So once we normalize those, we have all sorts of limitations on infrastructure and things like that within the state, and that's not going away. Right. But what we can do is normalize those technologies so that legislators, when they hear Web3, don't immediately go, I don't know what that is. Or IT people, IT people, what's Web3? It took long enough for everybody to catch on to Web2. I think that the short answer to that is that we need to start using it for more things. And when it's being used, recognize it for what it is, right? Because it's not necessarily so clear what it is. And I think we did a lot of good at ETHDenver because we had a lot of Web3 examples that were out there, and people I had no idea you could do this. In a lot of cases, since these are using services, right, it's easier to put these pieces together than it is other solutions. So you can actually leapfrog some of the limitations that Web 2 technologies and client server technologies for sure, and multi-tier technologies have currently. So I'm a big proponent, but we need to be careful and not just say go Web 3. We need to give them use case. Why should they go Web 3? Where
and I think it sounds like what you're saying as a user is, just try stuff and give feedback and be a part of the process. Like let's collaborate on the feedback looping system to actually give those use cases, but then iterate on them quickly and figure out ways that we can just continue to advance the ball. So I think supporting each other in the innovation process and then actually using the technology. Like, for example, I'm gonna just say it right now. I will be a myColorado ID user within a week. Okay, so like I will have it all set up within a week, and I haven't done it. I'm like, why haven't I done this? Like, I need to be supportive of these things, and
it'll be the best 4 minutes of your life.
Best 4 minutes. Well, yeah, there's a couple other things I gotta do before I gotta do that. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject. Anyhow. Russell, thank you so much for your John, energy and your contribution to innovation, and quite frankly, pushing string up a hill, I know, is part of your job, and you do an amazing job at it. So thank you for being you, and we look forward to working with you a bunch more.
That's exciting. There's a whole lot of people pushing a whole lot of strings up the hill. Only a few of us have to make it, and we have a string that we can all use. But there's a lot of people pushing string. Yeah,
well, continue doing great work at the OIT team, and give our collective kudos to the collective team. We appreciate all the work going on over there. We're proud to live in this state, and we encourage anybody and everybody to come visit and see what we're talking about. Because, this is, when you talk about loose bricks in the wall of, the United States government, I mean, Colorado is a blaring, obvious example of an opportunity for real transformation in not a binary, tyranny of the minor majority kind of way, but in a real transformational, multidimensional way, new dimensional way. So
like you pull from the center, pull from the side,
pull the rope from the center.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining this episode of Opolis Public Radio, everyone. Remember to subscribe to Opolis and our YouTube channel for more videos just like this, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts if you prefer the audio version. If you're a freelancer, gig worker, independent contractor, and you're looking for an employment solution where you want to own your own employment and you want to be free and sovereign to work from where, with whom, and how much you choose, join us at opolis.co. That's opolis.co. We are an employment cooperative, refacing the way that employment is organized for individuals. So we look forward to seeing you next time. That's all.
Buffett corn forever.
Buffett corn forever. Bye, guys.